Sloth is the grave of gifts. Now, this comes to us from the author of the book The Intellectual Mind, which I just started reading. So forgive me for forgetting the author's name. And I've been having a battle with sloth, leisure, idleness, hard work recently. I've been having a battle in terms of not wanting my life to be all about work and all about grinding and pushing the needle, and wanting it to also be about taking it more easy. If I want to say just enjoy the afternoon in outside in the sun and not feel like I'm wasting my life, but being able to feel like that is living. But at the same time, not getting so obsessed with the idea of leisure and idleness that I don't share my gifts with the world, and I don't put enough effort and time into potentially producing something that will help the world. And I recently read Walden, and it was a very good book. And it didn't help at all with this debate of mine, because as if you've read Walden, Henry David Thoreau in those 2 years spent a great deal of time in leisure. And he talks about how at times he would just sit in his doorway from morning to noon. So essentially, 5, 6 a.m. till 12 o'clock. 5, 6 hours, he'd just stand in his doorway, just observing and chilling. And a part of me thinks that's profoundly deep. And it takes a special type of person to be able to do something like that. And to me, that isn't even sloth, because it's hard to sit and be attentive to a single pursuit for 6 hours, even if it's leisure, is hard. I don't think much people in this day and age could do that with how social media and short form content is ruining our dopamine and our attention and our focus. Being able to just be with nature, with oneself for 6 hours without without wanting to go get some food, go to the bathroom, get some drinks, any of those things, or, check your phone, see what's going on, or be consumed with what you might be missing out on. Be consumed with the fact that you could be working. So I'm trying to cultivate a life where, I don't work so much to miss out on the fruits of life, but also realizing that parts of the fruits of life are work. And when I say work, I mean more of, as he says in The Intellectual Mind, a vocation, something that you were called to do. I don't think working a job you hate is necessarily essential to living a good life. When I say work, I mean vocation, something that you were called to do, something that is almost doesn't even feel like work because you were called to do it. And then that almost, in a sense, to me, makes it so, in a sense, it is leisure, it is idleness. Well, I guess I would say more it's leisure. It's not idleness, but it's leisure because you enjoy it. It's just flow. It's just, you're not, to a certain degree, it takes discipline, but you're not, you know, dragging your nails on chalkboard to get things done. It flows more naturally. You don't need to call upon as much discipline and motivation to start pushing the needle because you naturally enjoy pushing the needle. But yeah, I've been dealing with this fine line, and he has a line where it says something, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, while at haste, we waste our lives. And I sat with that for a minute, and I really love that because I have this, while we postpone life, while we are postponing, life speeds by. And I talked about this recently in another video, but I think it helps with this video. Um, because I always took postpone to be, I think I took it wrong. I didn't look deep enough into what it meant, but I think subconsciously took it as, you know, go, 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 rush, rush, rush. And there is something special about the idea of, be quick, but don't rush, you know. And I think when we don't waste our time doing trivial pursuits, things that are just bear no fruit spiritually, intellectually, um, to our vocation, those things, fruitful relaxation, because, you can't work your mind 24/7. So, getting good sleep, and then, even when you're in waking hours, spending time wisely, not watching, degrading television, but maybe going and spending time with a good friend and just enjoying yourself and having good conversations, or watching a good movie, something that you haven't seen before, but it's not completely degrading. You're gonna maybe get some spark of inspiration or hope or something from it that's valuable. Like, I really like Dead Poet Society. It's probably my favorite movie, and I don't think, if you haven't watched that movie, I don't think you watching it is a waste of time. It may be the best use of your time at a particular point in time. But I think when we stop wasting time, we don't need to rush. You can, if you spent your day like Henry David Thoreau did, on a day where he spent 6 hours in his doorway, not moving. If you did only the essentials of life, I still think you would have enough time to get a full work day in, sit in for 6 hours, read, write, reflect, even spend time with people. But we just waste so much time that then, at least when I waste time, when I get back to doing what I'm doing, I feel this sense of urgency, this sense of rushing. Like, oh shit, like I just spent an hour doing this. I need to make up that hour in these next 3 hours. So instead of having 4 hours to do something, you give yourself 3 hours, and you feel obligated to get done what you would have got done in 4 hours. So the 3 hours aren't as fruitful because you're rushing, and you have one less hour to actually do whatever it is you're doing. And there's another line that Henry David Thoreau had that I loved in Walden, and it said, as if waste as said, as if you could waste time and not injure eternity. Because I think wasting time is something I obsess over. I hate wasting time, and I try to figure out why. Because I'm not afraid of death. Death really doesn't bother me. I've thought about it more than any other thing, and I've become content with the idea of it, frankly. And so it almost makes me wonder why I hate wasting time so much if I don't fear death. But I think I morally fear never living than I fear death. And wasting time is a surefire way not to live. And if you enjoy what you're doing, if you're aware and attentive while doing it, it's not a waste of time. But if you're doing something that you're going to regret, if you don't really want to do it, if you're just going through the motions, trying to, please somebody that doesn't really need to be pleased, and it'd be kinder if you just told them the truth, whatever it may be, these are waste of times, and these things injure eternity. And I don't know, I don't know exactly what that means, but I think it's beautiful. As if we could waste time without injuring eternity. Because yeah, I don't see how you could injure eternity, but I don't think that's the point. I don't think it's something. I mean, it's poetic, This it isn't something I would say to wholly take it literally, but if it hits the mark, then it's that innate feeling that there's something wrong with wasting time, that it's not right, that it's disgraceful to whoever or whatever gave you time. Because we don't die someday. We die every day. We die every second that passes, and that is a better way to view death, as a thing that is happening constantly, as something that may finally happen sooner than later. So yeah, I've really been. Give me one second. Oh, my knee. Sorry if you can hear that. But truly, sloth is the grave of gifts. And I don't think it's a waste of time to truly go after your gifts. I don't think spending every hour of the day embarking on your vocation is a waste of time, because it's your vocation. If you're spending every hour of the day just to make money at some job you don't like, I think that's a different story. But a vocation is the thing you were called to do, the thing you were called to spend the better part of your life on. And spending all of your time in pursuit of that, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But also finding the balance to where you can still have leisure. Because I've noticed recently, I was almost, I felt like I was rushing too much. I was wasting too much time in frivolous activities, and then I found myself rushing too much in the things that mattered. And I wasn't bearing fruit where I wanted to bear fruit. And now recently, I've decided to go back to, because I used to just let things happen. I used to just read, and then an idea would come to me, and I'd write it, and then I'd be like, yeah, it's a good video, and then I'd make the video. And I almost started to try to force the process of having profound insights and great videos and this, that, and the other. And I found that they weren't coming out as well. And then I started to stop being in so much haste. I started going on longer walks. I started journaling more, started journaling longer. I started reading more, reading longer, spending, the goal of the day to just go for a hike and maybe get some reading done. And then I found myself having, again, so many profound ideas like I used to have. And for a while, I was wondering why I stopped having them. And I think it was the haste. The haste to be, because I wasn't trying to, because I didn't want sloth. But the only reason sloth was even the potential was because I was wasting time and I was injuring eternity. And when I stopped wasting time, my vocation again naturally bubbled to the surface, and I remembered all that I should be doing, and the universe was feeding me energy to do it. And to kind of get back on that idea I said at the beginning I was wrestling with, of like working hard and resting and enjoying life. I think sometimes you may need to sacrifice things for your vocation. But at the end of the day, if you're not wasting so much time, you really have time for everything. As Seneca says, in his On the Shortness of Life, it's not that life is short, it's that we waste a lot of it. And that is so true, because if you think about all that you want to get done in life, it doesn't take 80 years. You know, it doesn't take that long. But we spend so much time doing things that are unbeneficial to where we want to get to. And then that is how we waste life. That is how we waste our time. That is how life seems so short in the end, because we spent so much of it in frivolous activities. And truly, I don't think it's to waste time when, as I said, you're in a vocation or you're actively resting. Seneca also has an essay on leisure. And He says we should go into leisure as soon as possible because we will bear greater fruits than any other practice. And I don't think he means leisure by, laying in bed all day and, he doesn't mean leisure like that. He means the philosophical, the contemplation, the intellectual leisure that you can partake in. And I think this is what we should spend the latter, not the latter, but the more portion of our time in. And realize that if we just don't waste time, there's no need to haste because all we're rushing towards is death. And to not let sloth bury our gifts, but also not let toil bury them as well.